Jorge Messi has died. The father of Lionel Messi, and the man who guided his son's entire career from a dusty pitch in Rosario to the very top of world football, passed away this week at a hospital in Rosario, Argentina, the city where he was born. He was 68. His death was announced by Newell's Old Boys, the Rosario club at the center of the Messi family story, who said he had been receiving treatment in recent months for an illness. So today we're not going to do drama or speculation. We're going to talk about who Jorge Messi actually was, and why anyone who has ever watched Lionel Messi play owes him something. Because without this man, there is a very real chance the rest of us never see his son play football at all. Let's start at the beginning in Rosario. Jorge Messi was not a wealthy man. He worked in a steel factory. He was, by every account, an ordinary working father in an ordinary Argentine industrial city, raising 4 children with his wife Celia. He also coached youth football locally, at Grandoli, the small neighborhood club where a tiny boy who could barely be seen behind the ball first started playing. That's where it began. Not in an academy. Not in a scouting program. On a local pitch, with his dad on the touchline. From there came Newell's Old Boys, and the beginnings of a story that people in Rosario still talk about, the child who was so far beyond everyone around him that adults would come to watch youth games just to see him. And then came the problem that nearly ended everything. Around the age of 11, Lionel was diagnosed with a growth hormone deficiency. He was tiny, noticeably, unusually small for his age. The condition was treatable, but the treatment was expensive. The kind of expensive that a steel factory salary in Argentina simply could not absorb month after month, year after year. This is the part of the story people skip past, and it's the most important part. There was a genuine possibility that the greatest footballer of his generation would never make it, not because of talent, but because of money. Argentine clubs couldn't or wouldn't cover it. So Jorge did what a lot of parents talk about and very few actually do. He took his son to another continent to find someone who would. Barcelona, in the year 2000. Jorge traveled with a 13-year-old Lionel to Spain for a trial at FC Barcelona. The story of what happened next has become one of the most famous in football history. The coaching staff saw enough almost immediately, but the club hesitated signing a foreign child. Relocating an entire family and paying for ongoing medical treatment was an unusual and expensive commitment. The delay dragged on. And then, at a tennis club in Barcelona, the Barca official Carles Rexach reportedly grabbed a paper napkin and wrote out a commitment to sign the boy, right there, because he couldn't risk waiting any longer. That napkin is now football folklore. But look at who was sitting at that table. A father who had flown his son thousands of miles from home on the belief that somebody, somewhere, would say yes. They moved to Spain. Barcelona covered the treatment. Lionel entered La Masia. Everything the world has watched since flows from that decision. And Jorge never stopped being the one at the table. As his son's career grew into something almost unmanageable in scale, Jorge became his agent and the head of his business affairs. He negotiated the Barcelona contracts through the years of Ballon d'Ors and Champions Leagues. He handled the departure from Barcelona and the move to Paris Saint-Germain. He negotiated the transfer to Inter Miami that reshaped football in the United States. He also managed the image rights, the endorsements, and a portfolio of investments spanning real estate, hotels, and restaurants. Think about the scale of that. A man who worked in a steel factory ended up running the business affairs of the most commercially valuable footballer on the planet. And he did it while remaining, first and foremost, his father. That combination is rarer than people realize. Plenty of great players are surrounded by agents, advisors, and hangers-on who arrive once the money does. Lionel Messi's inner circle stayed the same people it had always been. His dad negotiated his contracts. His mum, Celia, remained his mum. Whatever you think of how any individual deal was handled, the loyalty in that family was never in question. It wasn't always smooth, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. The family faced legal difficulties in Spain over tax matters during the Barcelona years, which both Lionel and Jorge went through publicly. But that period is a footnote in a life that was overwhelmingly defined by one thing: getting his son to where he was capable of going, and then protecting him once he got there. And then there's the timing of all this, which makes it harder. Jorge had been unwell for some time. His illness reportedly became a talking point during this summer's World Cup, the tournament that everybody understood would be Lionel's last. So picture that. Argentina go all the way to the final in New York. Messi is playing the closing chapter of the greatest international career in the sport's history, chasing one more trophy, in front of the whole world. And his father, the man who took him to Barcelona at 13, is seriously ill. Argentina lost that final 1-0 to Spain. Messi didn't score. And now, weeks later, this. Whatever you think about that final, about the fallout, about any of the arguments that followed it, none of that matters this week. A son has lost his father, and he happens to be the most watched man in football. Jorge is survived by his wife, Celia, and their 4 children. Lionel and his 2 older brothers Rodrigo and Matias, and his younger sister Maria Sol. A family that stayed together through an almost impossible level of fame, and one that is now grieving in front of an audience of hundreds of millions. So what's the legacy here? Jorge Messi will be remembered as an agent, and there will be plenty of analysis of the deals. But that isn't the real story. The real story is a father who was told his son had a medical condition his salary couldn't cover, and who refused to accept that as the end of it. Who got on a plane. Who sat in a room in a foreign country and waited for someone to say yes. Who moved his entire family across the world on the strength of a belief in a 13-year-old boy. Every time you've watched Messi do something you'd never seen a human being do with a football, the goals, the World Cup, all of it that exists partly because one man in Rosario decided that a lack of money wasn't going to be the reason it didn't happen. That's a hell of a thing for any parent to leave behind. Rest in peace, Jorge Messi. 68 years old. And our condolences to Lionel, to Celia, to Rodrigo, Matias and Maria Sol, and to everyone who loved him. If you've got a memory of what Messi's career has meant to you, or a word for the family, leave it in the comments. I'll be reading them. And I'd ask you to keep it respectful today. There'll be plenty of time for football arguments next week.